Michigan has some of the most poorly funded roads and bridges in the country. You see the results whenever you drive to work, take the kids to school, or head out on vacation. We count on these roads to drive our economy and keep us safe. It's time to invest in them. Tell our leaders in Lansing to produce a plan that serves our state. Bad roads demand big solutions. Take action at fixmistate.org. Paid for by the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association.
Chris loves flying. He loves helping others soar to new heights too. So he built a course on Kajabi that turned his passion into a business. That took off into a community where aspiring pilots share their progress, gain confidence, and navigate their journeys together. That's the perfect blend that transformed him from a pilot into an entrepreneur.
introduce them in a minute. We're going to be taking your questions for the next hour, not only about what's happening in court today, but what has happened over the past several days, what's happened in the past several weeks. What do you think about the case at this point? If you have a question, submit it on YouTube. We're going to answer it in real time. I am made of questions, because let me tell you about what happened today. And then we're going to get Elizabeth Milner on, who's been in that courtroom, to give us a play-by-play too. But the testimony today was regarding the alleged break-in at Kid Cudi's house, the alleged firebombing of his car. I've said it before, I said it again. Kid Cudi, very important witness in this case to establish some of the underlying crimes for the overall racketeering charge. So arson that came out of testimony today. You had this member of the Los Angeles Police Department saying that there was an Escalade registered to Bad Boy Records that was found near the crime scene, near the scene of the break-in. There was some very interesting cross-examination, too, that we'll get into as well. A lot of discussion about DNA that was found on this glass bottle, the Molotov cocktail that was used in the firebombing of his car, the alleged firebombing of his car, that it belonged to a female contributor, not entirely sure who that is. Big back and forth between the prosecution and defense regarding fingerprint cards and whether they were apparently destroyed. Defense objected to this. They objected to this line of questioning because they said it now puts in the minds of the jury that it looks like Combs or his team is responsible for destroying this piece of evidence. There was also discussion about a glove that wasn't tested for DNA. Was it maybe worn by the person who allegedly threw the Molotov cocktail? And right before they went to lunch, a celebrity stylist gets on the stand. Deontay Nash worked for Diddy and Cassie. And I will tell you, based on just my reading of the transcript, what personality this guy has. And also quite relevant to Cassie Ventura's testimony, alleged victim number one in this case, really, really important. So without further ado, I want to bring on Elizabeth Milner, law and crimes reporter who has been in that courtroom every day for testimony. Elizabeth, so great to see you. I have to start with Deontay Nash, okay, because I can feel the personality through the court updates. Talk to us about, this was again, right before the lunch break, called by the prosecution. What did he say, and how was his testimony relevant to Cassandra Ventura?
Well, I'm not going to lie, Jesse. I absolutely love everything about Deontay Nash being on the witness stand. He's funny, he's sassy, and look, when I see it, if I were to see an exhibit photo of myself and I looked in a beautiful in this glamorous headshot, I would tell the entire courtroom too that I looked fabulous and stunning, and there was just this eruption of laughter inside the courtroom. And so Deontay Nash definitely at some points during his testimony, the personality is brought out, but he is there to talk about a lot of substance too, and that is just about his working relationship with Cassie Ventura as well as even Diddy. He styled both of them. However, he did have kind of a better friendship and relationship with Cassie, and he witnessed a lot according to his testimony during his time while he had worked as a stylist with her. And so we're introduced to Deontay Nash around 12 o'clock-ish, right before the lunch break, the last witness who was called before we went to lunch. And so he was kind of explaining just how he had started working with Diddy and Cassie. He started off as an intern for Derek Roche, and Derek Roche was actually Diddy's stylist. And when Deontay is on the witness stand, Jesse, he's not even referring to him as Diddy or Sean Combs. He calls him Puff or Puffy. That is what he calls him by, and that's normally the name that he's familiar with. And so we do see that exhibit photo of Deontay Nash. It was a glamour shot of him, and of course he said that he looked amazing and fabulous, and I'm sure the transcript read just that, but just being inside the courtroom, it definitely was kind of a good, funny highlight moment, and then it got serious from there. So he was explaining that he had worked with Diddy and Cassie from 2008 to 2018, so about a 10-year period. Then we get into the 2009 to 28 time frame, which is a long time, but Maureen Comey, who did the question direct examination, was essentially asking some foundational questions just about how much time beyond.
Game of Thrones, King's Road. Download now.
Own girlfriend, that being Cassie, and he said he being Deontay said that Diddy would call Cassie an outright hoe, an outright SLUT. And I'm sorry, guys, I know I have to be very careful with just the words that I can say on air. But Deontay explained that when Diddy would call her these names and when he would use these words against her, that Cassie would be sad. She would be depressed about this name calling. Deontay went on to explain that Diddy threatened Cassie a number of times, threatened to release her sex tapes, send those sex tapes to her parents, threatened to beat Cassie's behind, and it drove Cassie essentially crazy. She would cry, she would stay in the house. Deontay explained that Cassie would essentially cocoon up when Diddy would just call her these names, and Diddy threatened not to release her music, something that the government has talked about at length throughout a bunch of different witness testimony. And around this time frame from 2012, 2013-ish, again, when Deontay was still working with Diddy and Cassie, Deontay explained that Diddy threatened to do something to Cassie's parents. Now, they didn't elaborate what this threat was, but I'm sure once we get back from the lunch break, they'll kind of expand more on just that. But it seems like from Deontay's point of view that Diddy threatened Cassie a number of times. Diddy even threatened Cassie and Deontay that Cassie couldn't go out with Deontay and that she needed to bring her behind home, essentially, and that Cassie again would be referred to as the B word, and that Cassie would have to essentially do whatever Diddy said, whether it was how her appearance looked, her hair was down a certain way, whether it was up a certain way. And so I think as far as just the direct examination goes, yes, we did have a funny moment at the beginning of the testimony, but really just getting into just kind of the weight of the testimony, it seems that Deontay is kind of, in essence, kind of giving more credibility to a lot of the other witness testimony, just about how mean and potentially forceful Diddy was against her.
Right, when you're talking about violence, threats, verbal abuse, it's all important for force, fraud, coercion, right? The underlying elements for sex trafficking. And also goes to the larger theme of why Cassie didn't walk away, why she didn't fight back, why didn't she report Sean Combs? It's a big issue in this case. And talking about that power dynamic is something that's already come up in the past few weeks, and obviously something that's being explored with his testimony. There was a lot of testimony this morning regarding Kid Cudi, because Kid Cudi had taken a stand last week, said that he had this relationship with Cassandra Ventura, and then was retaliated against by Sean Combs, that his house was broken into, his car was torched. And I got to ask you, Elizabeth, based on the testimony today from, I believe, members of Los Angeles Police Department and the fire department, it seems like that might have happened, that his house was broken into and that his car was actually firebombed, right? I mean, what were some of the highlights regarding that about whether this in fact did happen?
Yeah, well, we heard a lot of evidence this morning, especially with the first witness that was called to the stand, and that was Officer Christopher Ignacio. He does work with the LAPD. And he was just explaining his response to the December 2011, this happened December 22nd of 2011, the response to the break-in at Kid Cudi's home. And so it was just interesting kind of hearing his perspective just from an evidentiary standpoint, police perspective. And so he says that he was dispatched around 8:20 a.m. that day, a possible suspect kind of staring down near and around the house. And so he responded, and when he responded, what did he see? He noticed right off the bat a black Escalade. And it's interesting that that was one of the first things he said when he was talking about his response, because what did we learn just yesterday when Capricorn Clark was on the stand? That Diddy, Ruben, and Capricorn Clark, according to her testimony, traveled down to Kid Cudi's house in what? A black Escalade. And so Officer Ignacio was explaining that he didn't notice the passengers inside the vehicle because there was so much heavy tint on the windows. What he did notice was a particular license plate. And he said that that license plate number stuck out to him. He remembered that license plate number. He explained that while they had arrived to the house, his partner had jumped over the fence to kind of let him in to the door. They opened the door. No one was home at the time, but what they did notice was some unwrapped gifts. And it's interesting because while Kid Cudi was testifying, he said that there were gifts unwrapped in the kitchen area. These were fancy gifts, kind of like Chanel bags and watches, that type of thing. And so then later on, more detectives arrived to this area. But it's interesting, Jesse, because he was explaining that, excuse me, he was explaining that when they had exited the home, they noticed that same exact black Escalade kind of driving back towards the hill, driving at a slower pace, around 10 to 15 miles per hour. He said around the first time he saw the black Escalade that they were driving off fast, which I think also goes to verify Capricorn Clark's explanation, or Capricorn Clark's testimony yesterday, where she was explaining how she, Ruben, and Diddy had all spotted Kid Cudi's car. They chased him and then, excuse me, later returned. And so right before the direct examination ended, we see this exhibit photo, and I think that the prosecution kind of did a big aha moment here, because we see the DMV vehicle registration. And I know you kind of spoiled away, Jesse, but that vehicle was registered to Bad Boy Productions, Inc. And it was the exact same license plate that Officer Ignacio had first spotted. And so that was the big moment just from his testimony. Obviously, under the cross-examination, it was really picked apart just as far as his response goes to investigating this break-in, whether or not that there were dead ends around the Hollywood Hills neighborhood, and maybe that was an explanation as to why the black Escalade was seen again. And I think, when Brian Steele was doing the cross-examination, he was poking holes where holes needed to have been poked, right? He was asking questions as far as why a BOLO response wasn't put out, why no arrests were made, why no charge beyond just trespassing. It was no burglary charge or no robbery charge, any of that sort. He didn't spot a car chasing another car, and he didn't hear about a kidnapping in this matter, and that there was no property disturbed, even though there was gifts open that Kid Cudi says weren't open when he had left his home. And so those were the big highlights from his testimony. Then we get into arson investigator Lance Jimenez, and I think Lance Jimenez's testimony was pretty interesting today, because he is an arson investigator, and he was really kind of explaining just the ins and outs of investigating this type of firebomb or car bomb, but particularly this Molotov cocktail that was lodged into Kid Cudi's home. According to him, he says that he had responded to the call, that he had observed this car parked close to the garage, and then he saw this black Porsche 911, saw that there was a cutout roof inside the Porsche, something that we've all seen from those exhibit photos. And he said that his initial hypothesis was the engine wasn't damaged, the back seats weren't necessarily damaged, the weather was good that day, so this wasn't a natural accident. This wasn't because of the weather or anything like that. He's believed, especially after smelling things like gasoline coming from that glass bottle, that he believed this was a Molotov cocktail. And so we see a whole bunch of different exhibits. We see exhibits of Kid Cudi's front door. We see exhibits of Kid Cudi's driveway with the black Porsche there. It was burned. We see the roof, and Jimenez has said that he believed that roof was actually cut intentionally. We see the interior of Kid Cudi's Porsche, where you can see a glass bottle, you can see a handkerchief over into the console area, which is kind of like this designery silky cloth material. And he believed that that was kind of the root in the damage as far as what had happened. And so he summed up his conclusion, because we saw a whole bunch of different exhibits too, that I'm sure we'll get into more later on, Jesse. But his conclusion was that someone took this bottle, put gasoline in it, put a cloth over it, cut the roof out. The cloth fell out whenever the Molotov cocktail was lodged into the roof, and so that fire ended up being contained specifically to the car. Now, he says that he's investigated arson when it comes to Molotov cocktails before. He has a lot of experience. He's been doing this he's been doing arson investigations since the earliest around 2011. So he's been doing this a long time, and he said, surprisingly, that the damage wasn't as bad as he's seen in other instances that involve Molotov cocktails. He explained that it could have been so much worse, where the fire could have just essentially exploded the car, only leaves of the car. The car could have, the fire from the car could have even went over to the house or to the garage area. Like, the damage could have been a lot worse than it actually was. So that was a surprising tidbit that he had said today, where he explained that even though a Molotov cocktail was lodged into the car, and as Kid Cudi had explained while he was testifying, that he could not refix the car was beyond repair, that according to investigator Lance Jimenez, that essentially this fire could have been a lot worse. But what's also interesting, Jesse, is that when we start to get into the fingerprints and just the DNA that was collected, essentially the defense thought it was kind of enough for the grounds of a mistrial. Why? Because the government was essentially asking questions as far as whether or not fingerprints were taken inside the car and around the car. But the victim in this case, the victim obviously being Scott Mescudi, aka Kid Cudi, he had someone do fingerprints after the break-in at his home. He submits fingerprints over to officials, and officials officially had this fingerprint card. But the thing is he was asked, he being investigator Lance Jimenez, was asked by Mary Slavic while he was questioned under direct, did you find this unusual? Because the fingerprint cards were later destroyed. So he was asked, do you find this unusual? Has evidence ever been destroyed before? Obviously, there was going to be an objection from the defense. Obviously, there was going to be a sidebar because the defense did not want this information to be heard in from the jury. So when the jury had to kind of leave the room for a quick break for arguments outside the presence of the jury, they were just really getting into it. And Alexandra Shapiro got up and was like, we have the ground, or I believe there's enough grounds for a mistrial. And everyone just kind of was like, okay, what is about happening? And obviously we know that didn't necessarily happen because another witness was called later on. But it really seemed like the defense was very upset and found this to be extremely prejudicial against their client.
Because it makes the jury believe, the argument is that someone destroyed the fingerprint cards and that someone was Sean Combs or a member of his team. And I know that the judge even questioned the prosecutor about why you even ask questions like this, and at the end told the jury to disregard the commentary about the fingerprint cards. I mean, the genie's, it's already out of the bottle. I mean, they already heard it. Well, they're not supposed to consider it, but they're human beings. Okay, Elizabeth, before I let you go, one more question. So we're taking a bunch of questions from YouTube right now. Again, I have an all-star panel I'm going to bring on in a minute, but before I do, we have a question from Leg7K that is for you, Elizabeth. The question is, hi, hope all is well. I have a question for Elizabeth Milner. What's her opinion on the jury so far? How are they holding up?
Well, I think the jury is holding up exceptionally well. I think the jury is very much how they've always been. They've been very involved in this case. And by involved, I mean they're taking notes down. They're listening to this testimony. From what I can see of them when I'm sitting inside the gallery, I don't see any heads kind of nodding off, falling asleep, any of that sort. I'm kind of wondering about the jury myself, whether or not they found this kind of aha moment, the same as us maybe in the press or other members in the gallery, where that big moment where seeing that defense exhibit about the vehicle registration being to Bad Boy Entertainment or to Bad Boy Incorporated. So as far as I could tell from the jury, they definitely are still very attentive from it, and they're definitely still paying very close attention. I'm probably sure that during that sidebar when the objections were had, they were probably like, what is going on? But for the most part, they're still paying very close attention.
Good, that's what they should be doing. This is going to be a long case, not an easy case for them to sit on, but Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much for coming on, breaking down the ins and outs of the testimony from today, as you do every day. Thanks so much, and I know you have to head back into court.
Thanks, Jesse.
Okay, so now I get to bring on my all-star panel. We're going to be taking your questions for the next hour or so. I am joined by criminal defense attorney and civil rights attorney Tyler Bailey, criminal defense attorney William Corman, and Ashley Banfield, host of this incredible podcast. I hope everybody checks it out. It's called Drop Dead Serious, and host of Banfield on News Nation. It's great to have you all here. Again, like I said, all-star panel. Ashley, I'm going to start with you. You heard about the testimony today. I mean, it's important regarding Kid Cudi's testimony. It's important talking about the firebombing, the break-in. What were you taking away from it? What do you think was important from today's testimony so far?
So I've been looking at every little piece, every little day, and I am seeing very much a RICO case, despite the fact that most people online are saying, I don't see RICO, I see domestic violence. I see RICO right and center. And I've been astounded at how thorough the prosecutor's case has been so far. How many instances, I'm forgetting more than I've learned, in this case, it seems. But today, we went from watching episodes of Sex and the City to episodes of The Sopranos, right? employees allegedly collect up his used condoms after his freak-offs. You think you have a bad job, but he's ruined. He's really ruined as a person. He's sort of Cosby'd, he's Weinstein, he's Epstein, even if he beats the rap legally. And so I think for that matter, Jesse, and look, you're a lawyer, I think you'd have to agree, how could you possibly think for a minute it's a good idea to put a guy so hated at this point on the stand?
Well, Ashley, the fact that he released a video 2 days after that footage was published by CNN, and he thought it was a good idea to apologize for him appearing to beat Cassandra Ventura, I don't know what he was thinking, because he essentially admitted it was him, and he forfeited any argument that he, I mean, and I don't know what he would say if he was on the stand. Sure, he testified in his prior trial, Ashley, right, 25 years ago, but very different circumstances.
Very different circumstances, and I will dare say that during the J-Lo Diddy phase, I lived through that. I was reporting during that time, and many years before that. But he was still beloved. He was still Diddy. He was Joe's boyfriend. He was massive in life, and didn't know, a fraction of what we think we know now. So it was a different story. It was a different case. That's the case. Maybe you do roll the dice and you put your client on the stand. But again, this is a situation where, again, even if he's not guilty of all the crimes he's charged with, he is 100% guilty of being a despicable human being. I mean, honestly, Capricorn Clark saying she was paid $65,000 a year, and the kind she was being forced to do as an assistant. Again, I'm not even convicting him. I'm saying cleaning up these foul and disgusting hotel rooms, which all the assistants were tasked with doing. And then, losing her hair to a stress-related disorder that she got from working so hard under stressful conditions. These are the kinds of things that will follow Diddy forever, not to mention the gross aspect of his sex predilections, right? Just the freaky, kinky nature of what got him off. Those are also things that he will be a pun for a long time. He will be a stickler.
And Lance was probably concerned the jury could make based on not even looking at the elements of the crimes, but they might look at it and say, my gosh, there's tape of him beating him, they're beating Cassandra Ventura, photographs, listen to the text messages, look what's being described. That's a concern for the defense. Okay, I got a question for you, William. Jesse, this is from Savannah Mata. Jesse, I'm so confused about Victory. She's missing, and people assume she's missing because she doesn't want to testify. Is it not suspicious and convenient for Diddy that she's gone? Well, here's the interesting about this, William, and I'll throw it to you. First of all, little self-promotion. We have Sidebar coming out right about this today. We believe this is Gina. Gina has come up a lot during the course of this trial. The defense has seemed to suggest that Gina was a source of conflict in the relationship between Cassie and Combs, that she was jealous of Gina. So the defense hasn't shied away from what role she might play in this prosecution. There was a back and forth last week about it, where Mark Agnifilo, who's defense counsel for Sean Combs, says she's not showing up. Prosecution says, no, she's very much a part of this case. She's victim 3, right? She's a part of this case in the indictment. It's part of the racketeering charge, that she's one of the people who've been abused. I think Gina actually did an interview several years ago where she claims she was abused by Combs. She was forced to have abortion. So she's a pivotal witness. But I guess the question is, going back to what we just heard from Savannah Mata, isn't it that she's not showing up? Is it good for Sean Combs' defense? Is it convenient? What do you think about it, William?
So I think it cuts both ways. Obviously, as Ashley said before, there's a lot of evidence here already. There really is. I agree with what Ashley said in the beginning of the show, that I think that RICO has been proven over and over and over again in this case. So whether or not a third victim comes to court, I think to some extent is irrelevant. I think that the government would obviously like to have her testimony, because I think she is going to continue to buttress their case. I think she's going to talk about things that she was forced into doing and things that had happened to her, and that's very important. I think if she does not testify, I think that's good for the defense. I think that anything that can chip away at the government's case is helpful, but I actually think that while it's good for the defense, I don't think it seals the deal in any shape, way, or form.
Got a super chat question from 1989. Thank you so much for the super chat question. I'll throw this to you, Tyler. Greetings, panel. For someone who was a big part of Sean Combs' life, why is Miss Coram, Diddy's right-hand woman, quiet? Do you think she took a deal with the feds and will testify soon? So this is, again, regarding Christina Coram, who we believe is Combs' chief of staff. I believe she's already come up several times during the course of this trial. We know she's come up in prior litigation facing Combs. What do you think, Tyler?
Well, there's still no telling if she took a deal for the prosecution. It's possible that she's been interviewed already, and they know she may not have anything really substantial to further her case. It's still too early to tell. She could be called, she may not be called, but as the prior panelist just said, Diddy has 99 problems here. One less witness helps him out by not having to deal with that, but there's still 98 other problems he has to deal with. So she seems like a crucial witness, but I think the prosecution has ample bullets in their gun to keep moving forward with points that are really making an impact on Mr. Combs possibly being convicted.
I don't know, for a racketeering charge, if you're talking about the criminal enterprise, and she's right at the start of it, I think she's to testify, and obviously have to explain if she took some sort of immunity deal or a proffer. But Tyler, got one question from, this is from Rusty Nick. This is for you, Blake. Really interesting question. Can they prove flying crimes for racketeering? Can they prove force leasing others' music? That's an interesting question.
It's an interesting question, and I think there's been a lot of testimony offered regarding the coercion, some of the verbal, the mechanism, the force, Cassie or Ms. Ventura to stay in a relationship with Mr. Combs. And I do think the act of her being signed to the record label, whether that is delays in albums being released, or let's say videos or not releasing albums when they were released, is an aspect of her wanting to stay into this relationship, non-consensual seeming relationship with Mr. Combs, who has the prosecution, based off all these different pressure points that he was able to exploit. So I do think they can use the fact of music being
is here as well. All right, we got a lot to unpack, so let's get right into it. And I want to begin with you, Jennifer. This is your old office as well. You heard from the expert witness, Dawn Hughes, this psychologist who was testifying as a blind expert, meaning she did not know Diddy, didn't know Cassie Ventura, and she was trying to paint a picture in general terms. How does this play for a jury? Because I gotta tell you, there were so many objections today, keeping her on the tightest of leashes. She couldn't get into many things. It had to be generalized.
Yeah. Power. And I think the reason you saw so many objections is because the defense realized that the jury was making those connections that Elizabeth was just talking about, right? They're saying, oh, credit cards, oh, rent. I know we heard all of that from Cassie Ventura. So there's no question it was very
predicate act that you can prove. I think there's 35, I think, federal or vice versa. I always get them mixed up. But that's the number of available predicate acts that you have under the RICO statute. But honestly, I mean, again, I keep coming back to just being kind of exhausted under the weight of all the different moments of testimony that I've heard that prove these elements. I don't even think you need drug trafficking at this point, but I certainly already heard a couple of assistants saying that they were dispatched to call a drug dealer, go get the drugs, pay for the drugs with, I think, Diddy money, come back, bring the drugs back, look inside the bag, see that it's MDMA, and then see that the drugs are actually disseminated among other, staff members, friends, family, partygoers, freak-off goers. So I'm not so sure that you even need that particular witness. It's kind of like Gina. Yeah, it would be helpful. Do you need it? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, especially when the photograph introduced evidence of what was found in his hotel room when he was ultimately arrested, what was found in his mansion. Yep. I'm still, by the way, actually confused about the allegation that there were phones stuffed in a shoe or shoes. That was an interesting little tidbit about that.
Right? Unless you don't want someone you love or know to find those phones. I'm not so sure that you're having the police, because why would you have all that other extraordinarily damning evidence just lying about, especially the box with puff on it containing allegedly mushrooms. I think that's more hiding these from people I don't want to have these.
So what I love about doing this lunch show, other than the fact that I get to have a great panel of guests and take everybody's questions, is because there are no cameras in them, because there's no audio equipment in that courtroom, we are back to real time. This happening. Break this down for you in real time, this live reporting. So the jury is they're back, and before the jury and the witness, Deontay Nash, were brought in, the prosecutor says, we want to show Mr. Nash a photo of this afternoon's witness, Mia, who we've heard about in opening statements, another alleged victim, without the screen in the gallery showing the photograph. So let's see. We're going to break down the real-time reporting, the real-time updates in this courtroom for you as this develops. Now, I want to go to you, William. Great question from Shop Girl. All the questions are great, but this one's really interesting. This is a Jesse question, but again, I'm going to throw it to William. Does the investigator not checking DNA on the glove show how incompetent LA investigators were in this case? And just to provide a little context, there was testimony earlier.
I don't give an F what you want to do. Go get dressed. Now, Clark said that she was then swept into a Cadillac Escalade. They drove to Kid Cudi's home, and she claimed that Diddy and one of his security guards then went inside the house. Clark frantically called Cassie to tell her what was happening, testifying that a short time later, Cudi's car pulled up next to them and then took off. Diddy and the security guard jumped back in the Escalade. Then she described a short car chase before Cudi got away. After it was all over, Clark said Diddy gave her an ultimatum. She and Cassie needed to sway Kid Cudi against telling the cops that Diddy was involved in the alleged break-in. Clark testified, quote, he says, if you guys don't convince him of that, I'll kill all you MFers. But that wasn't the only time that Clark said that she feared for her own life. She claimed Diddy once accused her of stealing diamond jewelry. Said that she suffered through 5 straight days of lie detector tests inside of a gutted, rundown Manhattan office building. She testified the man giving the tests warned her, quote, I'm not getting a good reading. You need to calm down. You're going to be in the East River if I can't get a reading on this. Clark even said that Diddy threatened her on her very first day working for him, testifying that it's because she worked at Suge Knight's record label before working for Diddy. She claimed Diddy took her to Central Park with his bodyguard. Happened. He told me he didn't know that I had anything to do with Suge Knight, and if anything happened, he would have to kill me. Clark also testified about Diddy's control over Cassie Ventura, saying that he had final approval on everything from Cassie's hair and makeup to the projects she was working on. And again with CNN's Elizabeth Wagmeister, who saw all of the testimony in court today. It was quite a day. She testified very emotionally, by the way, for a long period of time. And it was about a very dark parting message that she spoke about today when Diddy fired her in 2012. What did she say happened?
So Capricorn Clark didn't just testify to what she alleged happened while she was working for Diddy. She also testified and told the jury that after she was terminated, that he essentially blacklisted her from the industry. I want to read you part of what she said on the stand. She said, quote, that he said that I would never work again, that he would show me that all these people weren't my friends and he would make me kill myself. So she testified to the jury that she was scared. He had the power and the control over her career. She said that her home at the time was paid for by the company, her car was paid for by the company. All these things went away when she was terminated and she had trouble getting another job.
She was breaking down in sobs throughout. I mean, it almost was like she was on the edge of always crying, and she did throughout her entire testimony. But it was when she talked about asking for Sean's forgiveness, that she really got emotional. What happened?
Yes, so the defense during their cross-examination, they brought up a series of emails and text messages showing that Capricorn Clark stayed in communication with Sean Combs even after she was terminated. As recently as 2021 that she had been in communication with him, as recently as 2024 that she had met with him. Now, she explained this because she said he had all the power and she had nothing. And again, remember, she used that word blacklisted. So her explanation was, I had to work, I had to put food on the table. She said that she has a son with autism who is nonverbal. She has to provide for him. And she felt that the only way to continue to work in this industry is to stay in good graces, because she did say that she went to a few other companies for what she thought were job interviews or meetings, and that she realized that she was blacklisted because she thought her perspective that Diddy badmouthed her in the industry.
She went for interviews. They returned with warnings, apparently. A lot to unpack. Let's go over to the table. I want to talk to some of our great legal minds who are here as well to break this all down. We've got CNN legal analyst and, of course, criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson is in the building today. Also, we have the former Westchester DA, Mimi Rocha, and former Manhattan prosecutor Jeremy Saland. There is a lot to unpack today. First of all, she was really emotional throughout the entire day. I cannot overstate that enough. She was on the verge of tears throughout, holding her head in her hands, taking off her glasses just to emote even more. I don't mean emote in the way that I didn't believe her, but she was really emotional. I want to begin with you, Jeremy, because now we're in week 3, okay?
Police department did not do the proper job at, but now they're offering testimony to this jury to put Mr. Combs away for life. Why they didn't do all that work back when they originally investigated this case? To draw the attention away from Mr. Combs and the heinous conduct and acts that you heard, to the prosecution and their agents in doing sloppy investigation and collecting evidence.
So I stand corrected. There is a piece of reporting that says Officer Jimenez testified that the print card that was kept with evidence from the arson case was destroyed by an LAPD officer in August 2012. So interesting there. Hey, Ashley, guess what? Breaking news. Cassie Ventura welcomes third baby with husband Alex Fine. So very important that she testified week 1, right?
Was it ever? And I know that there was a lot of, back and forth about the defense trying to draw it out to get her to come back to the witness stand over a weekend and into a Monday, and that the prosecutors were worried she might go into labor. So, and not only that, it would give an opportunity to the defense to spend, a whole weekend, Diddy in his cell, going over all of her testimony to pick it apart for more cross-examination. But, good for her. I'm sure that this has been extraordinarily traumatic and stressful. I remember when I was 8-9 months pregnant, I didn't look as good as she did, by the way. It was in your life. She's got other kids at home as well. Then to add arguably the most traumatic moment, thus in and recounting all horrors that she's through. Hopefully has been put behind her, but having to bring them to the surface and face the man in her, beat her to a pulp at least once that we witnessed on tape. That could not have been an easy thing to do. Hormones are flying, and you're dealing with the impending birth of your third child. Good for her. Congratulations. I wish her that.
Trying to understand what the defense's argument is for what would be her incentive to make these things up against Sean Combs and go after him, because she had already sued him and then cooperated with the government. I'm not sure what she had to gain by putting her story for a jury to hear, for the world to dissect, for her to cooperate with the government. I cover cases all the time where somebody has a pending law in the middle of an active criminal case. A guilty verdict would certainly help, would it not? So I don't understand what the defense's argument is for what she had to gain to go after him. There's make all of this up.
I agree. Okay, so I'm just trying to go through it. Is saving face? I mean, we all know that Cassie's lawsuit formed the foundation for the investigation by the feds into Diddy, and then the resulting right now. women. Are they trying to suggest you're up here lying to save face because you lied? I don't know. I mean, it's a process. I keep back to extraordinarily expensive lawyers hired by Diddy. Millions and millions of dollars being spent on these lawyers, and they're fine attorneys. They just have a lump of coal to deal with. And so when I hear the cross-examination, oftentimes, as just a civilian out here, I tend to think it sounds a little like, I know you are, but what am I? I really don't feel like I'm seeing the chipping away at.
Is an arch enemy. There was testimony earlier in the week, or during the first 2 weeks of the trial, I should say, that one time Diddy heard in the LA house, Diddy heard that Suge Knight was at a nearby restaurant. He told the guys, get the guns and let's go up on him. By the time they got there, Suge Knight was gone. So this was, you know, he basically wanted to know that she was really loyal to him, because he was very, you know, he didn't want his secrets out there. And Suge Knight was an arch enemy. There were arch rivals. And, you know, that's a feud that we don't know quite all the details of it, but there's a lot of speculation about just how bad that feud got at various points. So she was on the stand, she was breaking down, and then when she was fired in 2012, she said that everything that she had was tied to Combs, her house, her car, her income, her 401k, all of this. She lost all that. She said for several years she was blacklisted in the music industry, and as you pointed out, Christina, she was, you know, this was her profession, being in the music industry, helping artists, helping develop artists, helping create records. That's the positions that she had developed for herself and had proven herself in, and that this was very painful for her to be blacklisted. She started contacting Combs a couple years later saying, I want to come back, I can't get any work. And she said that she wanted to come back, asked him to come back, and in 2016 he rehired her to deal with Cassie and to help rebrand and relaunch Cassie's career. But she broke down in tears several times, and we can just imagine, you know, the testimony, then the cross-examination, then the redirect, and then the re-cross-examination. She was the only witness that was on the stand the entire day, so that gives you an idea of just how important her testimony is to the prosecutors and them trying to prosecute this case.
Breaking news also to our newsroom here. There are sources there at TMZ that Cassie was rushed to a New York hospital today, and she's there in the labor unit. Sounds like she may be about to have that baby as well. Lisa, you've been covering this story. You saw how heavily pregnant Cassie was while she was giving that testimony. Does it shock you at all to hear that she's going into labor such a short time later?
Christina, it absolutely doesn't, because everybody was seeing, you know, everybody was talking about it, you know, when she was on the witness stand that first week, which was just basically 2 weeks ago. We thought that weekend she would possibly be going into labor, that she was very, you know, she was extremely pregnant, and yet she carried herself in court in a very dignified way, handled all of that pressure. But I think that was also, you know,
we are continuing to bring you these updates all in real time on Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Page. Always great to be with you.
Them up. I know different power dynamics at play, and there might be a lot of reasons. And this is something that was amplified by a forensic psychologist who testified about why victims may stay with their abusers and not speak out and not move forward and might agree. And even after they're sexually abused, go back. There's a number of different complicated factors there. But William, I mean, talking about the defense, this is a case where they're not only trying to strike the credibility of these witnesses, they're saying at the end of the day, it doesn't match up to the complicated and layered elements of sex trafficking and racketeering. What do you think of the defense so far?
So I think inconsistent statements are the key to a good cross-examination. And in a situation like this, in a case like this, where the alleged activities went on for so long and everybody involved in this case has a massive digital footprint, I think the defense attorneys have done a great job of culling through text messages and emails and so on and so forth, and pointing out those prior inconsistent statements. Capricorn Karp is a perfect example. You know, she's asked about her relationship with Diddy and what she wanted that relationship to look like, and she said it was always platonic. platonic. I never wanted to be anything but platonic. And lo and behold, she's cross-examined with text messages from God knows when saying, I had a huge crush on you, or do you realize I had a crush on you for so long? So again, these inconsistent statements are important. I do think that they chip away at the credibility of witnesses. Now, to Ashley's point, is it enough? Is it going to get a not guilty verdict because there's some inconsistent statements over the past X number of years? Probably not. But I do think the defense attorneys are doing a great job of scuffing up these witnesses with what they have available to them.
Talking to the defense, let's talk to prosecution for a second. Tyler, we got a question from Old Hollywood Angels. What do you think is the prosecution strategy so far? What do you think is the prosecution strategy so far? Yeah, that's the question.
Overall, I think they're taking their time and proving all the points for all the elements of the crimes that Mr. Combs has been accused of. But largely, I think they have done a great job in just pointing out that the conduct and the activity that Mr. Combs has done is irreprehensible. That he's a terrible person. That he's abused women. He's mentally and psychologically abused women. He's used the power of the holding and force even as his assistant to have alopecia for working so hard. So it's going to be hard for a jury to get around all of that and say, well, have they proved all this beyond a reasonable doubt? I mean, we're all legal commentators listening to this case and seeing the strong points, but these are regular people on the jury. And it could be too much for them just to even focus on the legal aspects of it during the closing arguments and prosecution, they're talking about all the elements of the crime, how they proved everything beyond a reasonable doubt. And they're going to be thinking, look at this terrible video that we saw. Look of all the witnesses that came through and testified and what they went through. This guy is guilty of something. And I think that's overall, when you have that type of theme that you can paint the defendant as a monster, it's kind of hard to get around that, to get them to think just about the small details and saying that the prosecution has not proved one minor point or 3 points beyond a reasonable doubt.
I said it before, I'm going to say it again. I think this whole case comes down to closing arguments. How they properly summarize all of this with jury instructions and the elements, I think it all comes down to closing.
I need the closing arguments.
I think everybody's confused. I'm complicated.
So yeah. Right? I have forgotten so much testimony because it's been a dirty fire hose. And I keep thinking, I got to make lists. Ashley, you've got to have lists in front of you from all of the points that have been scored and lost. So yeah, you're right. If you don't have a really good closing argument, a good narrative that just lists it out one by one, I think you're right. A lot of this, like Tyler just said, comes down to what an awful guy. Now, what was it about RICO?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. I got to tell you, we've been doing these shows every day, and we got a question the other day from somebody who watches, and it was a great email, really important question, but the tagline was, still don't understand what RICO is. And it's like, I get it. It's complicated. Okay, Tyler, one more question came, and I wanted to ask you about this. This is from Ashley Glass. Considering they have what they have from raiding one home, will they raid the other houses he owns? So they looked at 2 different properties. They really talked about what they found in Miami. Do you think that this is a point where they're gonna, raid other properties? No, not at this point, Tyler, right?
No, not at this point. But you gotta look at the asset forfeiture penalties that Mr. Combs could suffer if he's convicted of these crimes. I mean, the government has the ability to seize these assets if they believe they've been used in furtherance of the RICO and underlying sex trafficking. So they're all listed. They don't have to raid all the homes. Even if they find a mountain of evidence right now, there would be more baby oil that they can find, more lube, more cell phones. I don't think that really adds to their case other than the amount of evidence that they're already using and trying to corroborate through the witnesses they've called to the stand.
Ashley, go back to you. We got a question from Kay Morgan. How long does witness 2 have to present herself? And will legal action be taken against her? I think that this is in regards to Jane, who we've heard about, alleged victim number 2 in this case, came up in opening statements. Another person, a single mother who apparently had a relationship with Sean Combs, helped to further the narrative of sex trafficking. I guess the question is, what should we expect from her testimony? How does she have to present herself? How important she is? Let's just recharacterize the question that way, Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what she's going to say clearly, but I suspect that there'll be what I've seen already a lot of witnesses do, and that is corroborating the stories of the witnesses that came before them. It is remarkable how carbon copy many of their testimonies have been in describing down to the details in hotel rooms, how things are laid out. Unless all of these witnesses got together and had a coffee,
yeah, they do got this stuff laid out. Sure.
They sure do have similar accounts
Yes.
of life with Diddy. And perhaps Jane will have that, as well as, again, the piling on of what happened to her. Maybe there'll be another instance of Capricorn Clark said some things yesterday I didn't expect. 2 different kidnappings? Holy Dinah. Maybe she'll have an example of something like that. I don't know. But obviously the government has decided it's worthwhile to call her. But can I go back to that last question about the raids? I still don't understand why we haven't heard anything about what was seized in the LA raid, because all we kept hearing was 1,000 bottles of baby oil. And in Miami, it was only like a dozen. So is there something more to come? Because I'm popping the popcorn.
You're not the only one who said that. They said, I don't understand. They only found a limited number there. What happened to 1,000 bottles is the prosecution not being...
They got enough evidence.
Maybe, look, they'll call maybe LA investigators to talk more about this Homeland Security that...
So I click that like button.
Look, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because going back to what I said with Gina, alleged victim number 3, again, 2019, I believe, as she sat down for an interview on YouTube where she said Combs stomped her, punched her. You want to talk consistency? Go to the 2016 tape of Cassandra Ventura. Is it not the exact same thing? Now, again, is it domestic violence? Is it sex trafficking? Is it racketeering? Separate question. Okay. William, question from...
Jesse,
yes.
It's also pattern, right?
Pattern,
because part of RICO requires a pattern of behavior. And so, man, oh man, have I seen a whole bunch
they all
of
saying the same
patterns
stuff
laid out so far. What, we're only into 2 weeks here? So I think that's
they rehearsed all of
It
this.
may be a pattern of domestic abuse, but it speaks to patterns of behavior that just keep repeating and just keep getting corroborated.
And with the intent that he forces
Bill to click that like button.
sexual episodes. And these sexual episodes are commercial sex acts, and there's certain elements to follow there. But yeah, 100%. The pattern, so important for racketeering. I'm glad you mentioned that. William, we got a question from Camilla Chanko. Hi from the UK to Jesse and the panel.
Hey, some good
Thank
questions.
you for your daily shows and updates. Thank you. Question, do you think Diddy's security team may have struck a deal with prosecutors and might testify in the trial? William.
So, I would imagine when we talked about some of the other witnesses testifying, there were questions as to whether or not they had proffer agreements or if they had, received some sort of immunity in exchange for their testimony. I would imagine that Diddy's security team has some issues on their own regarding their own culpability here.
You're all questioning why P.
testimony
Diddy
that we
the only one on trial.
So I'd be surprised if they didn't have some sort of immunity deal worked out. And I do think it would be important to hear from them. I think that they are crucial witnesses as far as the racketeering goes, as well as to corroborate some of these other statements.
See a few people in the building.
That,
that like button.
Vanessa made and...
Do it faster.
Oh, they hit me with a commercial.
Do it easier. Do it better. And get a professional finish.
We know that Diddy wasn't doing these things by himself, and there was a team around him, and obviously that team includes security.
Where are all
So I would be surprised if we didn't hear from them, and if we do hear from them, I can almost guarantee that they've worked out a deal with the government. Otherwise, they have their own criminal exposure here.
Of course, or at least they have to be asked. Racketeering conspiracy? He can't agree with himself. There's got to be multiple players.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody asked that question.
Every superseding indictment has said the same thing, right? He's got his associates, the people around him who helped facilitate these crimes.
Every lawyer.
Actually, William, one more question I want to throw to you. It's an interesting legal question. This is from Nicole RZV. If Diddy knows deep down that he ordered the Molotov cocktail incident, again referring to the Kid Cudi bombing of his car, would he admit that to his lawyers? And if so, does the defense team still defend him knowing he committed the act? Good question.
No.
That is a good question. So, if I only represented people who were innocent, said they didn't do it, I'd be doing something else because it just doesn't work that way. So if he admitted to certain facts to his lawyers, that's attorney-client privilege and they can't reveal it, and chances are they would still continue to represent him. I assume that's the question. Again, there aren't a lot of lawyers out there who will only represent individuals who didn't do it.
But you can't lie, right? You can't lie to the court.
But that's a different story entirely, and I don't think that's what the question was. If the question was...
It was my question. I threw it in.
Sure, if they know that Diddy was involved in it, if they know he was involved in the Molotov cocktail incident, they can't then put him on the stand knowing he's going to perjure himself. That's problematic for Diddy and the lawyers, certainly. So that's a slightly different question and changes the dynamic of it. So no, as a lawyer, I cannot put a client or even a witness on the stand knowing that they're going to give a falsehood or perjure themselves.
So an update from court again. Fully back in session. The judge says, bring back in Mr. Nash, and then the jury all rise. Remember, who worked with Sean Combs and Cassie. Prosecutor asks, how many times in person have you witnessed Mr. Combs be violent? Nash replies, quite a few. Prosecutor says, this is a sealed exhibit. Without saying her name, do you recognize this person? We'll call Mia. Yes. Okay, so Tyler, this is confirmation, I think, that Mia is a pseudonym, right, from one of the alleged victims. We heard about her in opening statements. You can see the value of Mr. Nash's testimony, right? Not just testifying about observations regarding Cassie, but this other alleged victim, who I believe might testify today, right, Tyler? I mean, this is important.
Yeah. We're seeing right now from Mr. Nash, who's been around not just Ms. Ventura, but Mr. Combs, that he has knowledge of, one, Mr. Combs being violent, and he also recognizes another individual under the pseudonym Mia, and who we believe may testify. So that shows that he's seen something that goes to the pattern, other evidence of other crimes. It furthers the racketeering and possibly sex trafficking. And what the prosecution is doing, they're not calling anybody to the stand who they do not know.
Subscribe to the channel.
And they're furthering their case by witnesses who are corroborating the evidence. They may get beat up from a little bit, sorry for the pun there, on cross-examination from Mr. Combs' lawyers, but overall every witness has furthered the prosecution's case, and this is certainly doing the same here.
Ashley, we got an update from court. Prosecutor Maureen Comey asks,
it's all in real time.
What were you and Mia helping Cassie pack for? Responds, the OVO Fest in Canada. Who came to the door? Puff. He said, B, didn't I tell you to answer your phone? Then he dragged and hit her. How hard was he hitting her? And we're waiting for the response there. Your reaction, Ashley.
You know, here we go again. I want to hear more context in what that was about. This is obviously on its own looks like an instance of domestic assault, which she's not charged with. But it speaks to the grand pattern of how Diddy controlled this woman. And you can say control might have been in the packing for some events in Canada, and it may have also extended, because you don't just control in one aspect of your life, right? If you're controlling someone all the time, you're controlling how you behave with them on a regular basis, including during the freak-offs, including during the performances. She testified that she wanted to sing and she wanted to act and she wanted to model, but that Diddy wanted her to focus only on the music, right? Because that's what he could control. He could control the music. And what did he do? He controlled the music. He didn't release anything but one of her albums.
And we have a continuation.
That talent like that. She's not Beyonce.
An objection. It was overruled.
At least that's
Again,
what
how hard
they
did he hit her? Well, Nash responds very hard. We ran to the bedroom, but Puff pushed it open. He continued to attack Cassie with his fist. Prosecutor asked to try to help Cassie. I jumped on Puff's back. He threw me off. Mia too. So if Mia testifies, it'll be very curious what she has to say about this incident. Okay, question for you, William. This is from Stephanie Faircloth. I love the show. Awesome information. Thank you for updating us so well. You're welcome. Thank you so much for saying that. Do you think those who testified will be offered witness protection after it's over?
I don't think so. Witness protection, it's not quite like it is in the movies. Everyone knows who these folks are. I think the more likely deal is that some of these folks are going to seek out extra publicity, perhaps get movie deals, perhaps get booked. I think it's less likely than these folks being, somewhere in Minnesota.
Well, William, I mean,
they don't need no witness protection.
This is from AGGROCD. Why are we using aliases in court?
Start a podcast.
So, for folks like Mia, for example, talking about individuals who are victims of sexual.
This stuff is very entertaining, man. As the Diddy turns, I know y'all seen some of those soap operas. This is what it is. I got to get ready to get up out of here. So stay tuned for more content coming on GPTV1 live stream. And go check out other content on the channel. While you're stopping by, click that like button. If you're new here, click click that subscribe button as we march towards 8,000 subs. Peace out. One love. Stay blessed.